Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking Consciousness podcast. This week, my guest is Motorboat, and today we're going to be discussing some of his experiences in the psychedelic realm. How's it going, man?
It's going well. How are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty good at the moment. It's been a very challenging couple of weeks in my life, but
So I've heard.
at this very moment, like this tiny window of time, when you break things down to the minute, this is a good minute.
Yeah, I guess all that matters is the present moment, right?
That's all that matters, and sometimes it's hard to keep that mindset, but as soon as I remember that I need to get back into the moment, everything's good, man. It's all good.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to share today?
Well, I don't know. So I guess in the past couple weeks, really in the past couple months, I've realized I have these two separate identities. And one is, my person who I, go day to day, identifying as, my name's Adam, nice to meet you, kind of a thing. And then I have this online identity, which I've built up over the past couple years, which is my username, Motorboat. And I was inspired with this username many years ago when I started playing like Call of Duty. I just thought it was pretty funny, but it's kind of evolved into this kind of a crazy like online identity. I'm very active on the Psychonaut community on Reddit. In fact, I'm one of the moderators,
Right.
and that came like that came so naturally. I found the Psychonaut community, and I just really resonated with it, and I just went into the community with the only goal to produce quality content and to really enrich the community with what I had to say. And one thing led to another, and suddenly I'm this moderator, and and I'm also like, I know a lot of people personally on that community, and it's kind of evolved into this very strange thing. And now I'm at the point in my life where like my in person, my Adam identity is kind of like melting together with my Motorboat identity, and I'm trying to like figure out like, how do I manage this?
Right.
And I'm looking at examples like Psych Substance, like his name is Adam too, and his like online presence combined with his reputation is really actually causing a lot of turmoil. But there's so much support behind that because he's not hiding anything.
Right.
And I truly feel like I'm very much for advocacy when it comes to psychedelics. And I think that people shouldn't shy away. They should be cautious how they merge these sort of pseudo identities that they create in order to discuss psychedelics. And so I guess this podcast is kind of the first like, hello world, I am a human being and I'm not just Motorboat on the computer.
Right. Yeah, the merging of the identities is it's challenging because you just have to see like not everywhere is going to be accepting of the online persona that I have. It seems I don't know how many places that I can be that version of myself in the
Hmm.
physical world, but I am finding some. So it's not like there's none, but honestly, I feel more of myself on the psychonaut community than I do when I'm just doing my day to day, you know?
Right. And that's a good thing, and everybody needs to identify that in their life. If they feel gravitated towards something and they feel passionate about it, but it can't be integrated into their true self, then you have to find a way to integrate it, because you can't ignore your passions and what makes you happy in life.
Correct.
Um, so, for instance, I don't know if you've read my most recent post. It got a little bit of traction, essentially about my theory and how we as psychonauts embody psychedelic drugs themselves, and that higher level organizations and like organizational entities are kind of like, just a larger body. And so when we're hired on to like a company, that's like they're metabolizing us, like
Right.
they're
I did read that,
taking.
but yes, go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So uh, that came about because like I'm starting to like take a shit at my job. Yeah, and I, I, it's really hard to figure out like what I'm trying to do in my life. Yeah, I'm just this cog in this like corporate machine. And it's not that the company's bad. It's a really good company, and they treat me well and they pay me well. The people are nice, and my job is reasonable. It's nothing wrong with that, but it's almost like they're purging me because like I embody part of my like identity embodies the psychonaut. And I was explaining this to my wife last night, is like, you can give somebody a cheeseburger and you can say, hey, this is a cheeseburger. But if you take like a few drops of like pure LSD and drop it on the burger and they eat it and then they start tripping balls, they're like, whoa, that's more than a burger, right? And when you go into a job interview, you're not like, I'm not saying like, hey, like I have this alter ego on Reddit that is, the moderator of a psychedelic community, like hire me. And so it's almost like a year ago when I was hired on, they went to, the employee store. They bought, analyst Adam, and, that's what they thought that they were getting. But there's a few, a little hit of LSD in there too. And they're kind of like tripping now. And it's taken a year because these larger organizations, the larger something gets, the longer amount of time its metaphors take,
Yeah.
right? And so there's the old Hermetic principle: as above, so below; as below, so above.
Hmm.
And so just as we ingest something and it takes maybe 6 to 8 hours to metabolize and be sober again, a company will ingest something and it takes a year for it to be like, whoa, I'm like at the peak, kind of a thing.
Right.
And that's what they're realizing, which is why they're starting to purge me. And the reason I've come to this theory is because I look at that side of my life. That's the Adam ego. And I realize, like, okay, that's kind of where it's at. My family's really good. I really belong in my home. I have a 4.5-month-old son. He's just the best. And maybe I'm biased because I'm his dad, but like, whatever. Um,
No, I've heard
but
he's the best. That's what I've heard. You know.
yeah, well, I prophesized his birth, so on
Wow.
Reddit. So, yeah, that's a fucking rabbit hole, dude. I can explain maybe. Uh, but no, so I was looking at that side of my life, and there's some good things and some bad things happening. And my wife is pretty accepting of like my psychonautical endeavors. She doesn't like me, tripping balls for meaningless reasons. And she used to be against it, but now she's getting a broader perspective on the whole thing. And then I look at my online presence and I'm looking at it. It's like I've racked up some good karma. I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting out comments that get dozens or sometimes hundreds of upvotes. It's a democracy that measures your success.
Yeah.
And then like for some, like I'm sure you've seen it posted. I sticky to post on the subreddit. We got Dennis McKenna and Dr. Eduardo Luna, Luis Eduardo Luna, doing an AMA on the 28th.
Oh,
And this
wow.
came up, yeah, this came about some random user came about, like messaged the moderators, and this was during a hiatus that I was taking. And when I came back, this guy had said like, "Hey, I know Dennis McKenna and Luis Eduardo Luna, and they might be interested in AMA. Do you want me to set something up?" And the other moderators weren't really doing anything, like whatever, and that's fine. They're not as involved as I am, which is why I think they brought me on. I'm not sure of the reason, but I feel like I was brought on to be like the community moderator, like
Right.
the representative of the people. That's kind of
Right.
how I feel.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that would have been a terrible opportunity to waste. I'm really glad that you've
yeah,
picked up on that.
yeah. So, and I thought like, okay, this is Reddit. He's probably like bullshitting me, right? You can't believe some random user. Oh, I know Dennis McKenna. Yeah, right. So, well, one thing led to another, and Dennis McKenna verified himself with me on Twitter from his like actual account, and then Luis Eduardo Luna verified himself. We like exchanged information, and like we scheduled everything, and like it's set in stone. And it's like, okay, if you were to compare that to say like a sales company or like a corporate office, that would be like getting the big fish client. That's like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like you just got a giant sale this year. And that happened on the Psychonaut community. And so there's something that's happening on that side of my ego that's succeeding. And at the same time, there's things that are not happening that are really successful in my, Adam ego. And I'm trying to figure out, like, I've been doing some soul searching.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out, like, what direction am I going to take in life? Because I have to make money and provide for my family. But I also am passionate about these things. And I don't know, um, it's a difficult balance to make, because I can't be all gun ho like I'm gonna just become a shaman and
Right.
go off the grid, but at the same time I can't just abandon this calling of mine. And so
Correct.
this podcast is me testing like what happens when, like, how am I going to stir the pot of the universe if I throw myself out there on this podcast so people have a voice to put to the name Motorboat, and then they also know my name is Adam, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be an outlet for you, and I will always be an outlet and an advocate, whatever route you take. If you come up with some sort of medium to where you can channel your passionate side into a business or whatever, I will definitely be there to support you. So that's
Hell
not
yeah, man.
that's because that's the dream, man. That's what it's all about. If you can, like, I don't, you see it every now and then. Maybe not always on the Psychonaut community. I see it on the Shrooms board sometimes, where people are definitely trying to capitalize on the psychedelic experience in ways that feel, ugh, they just feel kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about this. But if you can do it in a way that is productive and actually provides a service or a benefit or entertainment, absolutely, I think you should try to do such a thing, because it's what you're passionate about. It's I don't know. It's all these things are changing and things are falling into place right now in our country with psychedelics, and who knows what the future might hold. Maybe someday we could be like mediators of the psychedelic experience, and we would love our job, wouldn't we? But
Yeah. Right.
but the
Well,
thing
it's
too
funny
here.
that,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, go on. Yeah, so it's funny that you say the word capitalize when you started that
Mm,
sentence or that little paragraph of yours. You said people try to capitalize on psychedelics. Um, I have next to me the Oxford Dictionary of English Entomology, and I got this for Christmas because it's something that I've wanted to explore, is the history of words.
okay.
Have you read The Inheritance Cycle, like Aragon
No, I
and
have
all
not.
that? You haven't? Okay. Well, maybe some listeners have, but to those who are familiar with it, there's an idea in that series. It's called something has its true name, and it's an Elvish. The Elvish language is the true name of things, and the true name of fire is Brissinger, which is like the name of I think the fourth book in that series. And if you know the true name of something, you can have power over it, and that's how
Ah,
magic happens, right? And so that metaphor is applicable in reality, because the Elvish language is the oldest language in Alagasia. That's the world of the inheritance cycle.
okay.
And so in the real world, if you look at like the Latin roots or the Sanskrit roots, or like the source of certain words, you can really have power over those words. And the reason I bring up capital is because when I was rambling in bed next to my wife, and I'm just like trying to, because like it's been a shit ass week at work. Like I'm literally probably going to get fired within the next month because I'm just not producing it the way they want me to.
Right.
And it's not that I'm not trying; it's that like it's just not. I'm just not apt for that position. Um, anyway, so and what is my value, and how can I how like, and my wife said, well, your intellect. And I said something like, but how can I make that into capital? And then I noticed myself saying like, oh, I said capital. For some reason, I used that word. But what does it mean? I really don't know what it means. People use words and they don't know their definitions. And it's like, I'm oftentimes like Googling the definition of very basic common words, because it's like, I don't know what the fuck these words mean, right?
Yeah,
The
I don't
true
know what you're
definitions of
trying to
these
say.
words. And so I went on to Google and I looked up capital. It means, well, yeah, the monetary like aspect of it. But if you go deeper into the etymology of the word, it means head, cap, CAP, cap.
Gotcha.
It means head of most importance. So if you think capital punishment, off with your head,
Right.
off with the most important thing, with right. And so it's like, my capital is my head, and my wife said my capital is my intellect, and so it's in my head,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you say like, but we've also adopted that word to mean money, right?
Right.
And that's an interesting cultural observation. And so if we take that understanding where like what's in our head is capital, quite literally, and then we have money as capital, you can begin to understand that there's some bridge there in culture where you can capitalize on what's in your mind. And
Ooh.
that's why I said it's interesting that you use the word capitalize, because um, that's exactly what people are trying to do, but they miss the point because they go straight to the money. And even if you look up the word pecuniary, right? And I learned this from reading. Have you heard of the book Walden?
I have not.
Yeah. So there's this book by Henry Trudeau, I think is his name, and he wrote a book called Walden, where essentially he goes to Walden, a pond called Walden. He lives like off the grid for a few years, and this is like in the mid 1800s, and he writes a book about it. And he meets like a lumberjack who is very dumb, but he's like a genius in his own field. Like he
He's
can
a
cut a
master of
tree
his
that
domain.
yeah, exactly. He could cut a tree flush with the ground so that you could sled a sled over it without
Wow.
any like yeah. So he's talking about this guy, and he kind of sums it up about how this lumberjack probably knows the true definition of pecuniary. And if so, then I looked up the word pecuniary, and it comes from, I think, the Latin root pecu, which means money, or an older definition means cattle. And so then I'm like, why the hell does it mean cattle? And Trudeau goes on to explain how you could bring your cattle to market to mortgage it. And so I'm like, holy shit. So back in the day, this is a realization I had. People would take their cattle, they would, take their cattle to market, or people would know they have cattle. They'd go to the market and say they want to buy apples. And it's like, well, I don't have any money, but I'll mortgage the hindquarters of my cattle if you give me 100 pounds of apples.
Mm.
And that's the essence, that's the root of the word pecuniary. And so it's like, So money has evolved into what it has today, and people miss the point because it's such a surface meaning. But if you look at the root meaning of like these words that mean money, you come to realize that they're based in things like herd, like your herd, or like your goods, or like the essence of trade, or what's the most value, like your head, you know.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but yeah, I'm full of rabbit holes, man.
No, I like it. I like it a lot. That's some really deep insights that I would have probably never gotten. I like
Oh,
that.
I do remember, because you said that people try to capitalize,
Yeah.
how great would it be if we could, make money being psychonauts? Well, look, so I hold this belief that there's one ultimate force, capital F, force in the universe. And it's like, okay, like, call it God, call it Gaia, call it,
Yes.
I use different terms for it because it has 1,000 names.
Yes.
There's other like forces in the world that are kind of subordinate, but of the same source. So there's this force in the world that the word, say it's this point of gravity, and the word like money or capital or pecuniary or goods, trade, all these words and ideas orbit around this force. And you have to understand that like intellect also orbits around this. It's like human capital. When you go, I'm an econ major, and in that field they call it like a college degree human capital.
Okay.
And so it's like you're increasing your human capital, and your degree is your flag. You're saying like, hey, I have capital, like I'm valuable.
Right.
And so it's like, so we know that this force, which money falls towards and intellect falls towards, we know this force exists. It's only a matter of figuring out the relationship between our intellectual ability that we gain from psychedelics and the value or the capital that we gain from taking a psychedelic, and tying that with the capital we gain from trade goods. And so that's a very difficult bridge to build. But if you can do it, it's possible. People make money off of being psychedelic figureheads. And so it's the people who try to build a straw bridge between psychedelics and money where they fail, and then they come off looking fake, because it's like, that's a
Right.
damn straw bridge. That's not going to hold up. Like, you asshole, you just want money.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's a great
and
point.
that's part of my mission. It's like, well, we all have, like, take for instance, I know you're a big fan of Jordan Peterson, right?
Yes.
So I watched an interview the other day where he pretty much laid out, like, somebody at like an interview asked him how much money he makes, and he just laid out his like revenue sources. It was incredible. He At that time he was making 80,000 Patreon. He's since deleted his Patreon account.
Right.
But it's like, holy fuck, this guy is blabbering his mouth and writing words,
Yep.
right? Just
Yep.
these sounds that he's flapping with his lips, and like these words that are being put into like just random symbols on paper, right? And $80,000 a month. That's a force to reckon with. He's found a way to bridge his intellect, his capital within.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's been helping people like myself find the meaning, find meaning.
Apt he it. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a measure of how apt he is in capitalizing on what's inside of him.
Yeah.
And it takes, you have to be savvy to know how to take what's inside of you and turn it into green papers that will get you other things.
Right. So, have you started like down a course to do this, or is it still just brainstorming?
Um, I'm trying to follow the example of the sage. You let go, you yield. You let come what will come. You can't force your hand at these things. because then it's not genuine.
Yes.
If you, so it requires faith, and so it's not necessarily that I'm trying to find a way to make money. I'm just going to have faith that if I keep pursuing my passions, if I keep doing things like coming onto podcasts, some motherfuckers out there are going to notice my voice and they're going to be like, who is this dude? Right?
Yes.
And that's when shit starts happening. And when shit starts happening, people start to band together and build relationships. And when you build relationships, you can look at the world and figure out, okay, instead of being a single individual facing the world, we're a group of individuals facing the world. And even two people is a force to reckon with.
Mm.
I was telling this to my friend the other night that kind of a thing with like me, him, and two of our like childhood friends. Like we all grew up in the same neighborhood and we'd call it like the hood. And it's like, hell yeah, man, that's a fucking great idea. And I said like 4 people is a force to reckon with. Like, unless you're okay, so imagine you walk into a bar with 3 of your best friends or whatever, and then like some asshole is like getting up in your business. Like, as long as that person's not like a professional MMA fighter, like the 4 of you could kick his fucking ass 100 out of 100 times.
Correct.
Like,
correct.
From a physical perspective, as below, so above, right? So from a very physical perspective, 4 people could beat any motherfucker up, and 4 people can beat probably a larger group of people up too if they're well coordinated and they train together, right? And
Yes.
so that transcends into the metaphysical realm as well, and money is up in that realm, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm trying to do things. I'm just letting the universe unfold before me, and wherever I feel drawn, I go to. And you, Caleb, you are someone I feel drawn towards, and that one force in the universe that exists is between us at this moment right now.
Right. Yes. Yes. All right. So how can I help you?
So many people are interested in what I have to say, but few will take action. And okay, let's go back to the main point of this channel, is talking about psychedelics.
Okay.
Have you read some of my trip reports?
I've read, I believe, 3 of them. Yes.
3 of them? Yeah, they're pretty fucking crazy, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. You might think I have psychosis or something, right?
Yeah. I might have had some thoughts of that before doing this.
Right. Yeah. So I'm some crazy motherfucker. So if you're listening to me out there, don't listen to me. I'm a crazy ass motherfucker. And my life is full of rabbit holes. But okay, so my most recent DMT experience, it's the one titled what is it called? I got my Reddit account pulled up here. This is the most profound trip I've ever experienced. It's titled "When One Flies Far from the Sun, They Are Eventually Brought Back to It with Ever Increasing Force. My hiatus from Reddit, my return, and what I've learned."
Yes.
Did you read that one?
Yes, I did. Let's go into
Okay.
it.
All right, let's start our engines. Here we go. It's going to take a while.
Yes.
Okay, so it all started, my buddy came to visit me on a weekend, and we met a couple years ago in college, and him and I, like, he was the first person I did DMT with, and him and I have kind of had this struggle with DMT where it's like we don't know what the fuck to do with it, because it's hard to smoke, for one thing. It's just a hard technique to really get down. And so if you're trying to look for that like breakthrough experience and you're an idiot going into like smoking DMT, you're not going to have a breakthrough experience. And it's something that you have to like go into with like technique and respect. And so like him and I have kind of like wrestled around with DMT for some time. And so he visited me that week, and
I think you cut out on me.
it was me and him, and my wife was out of the house, but my son was there. He was sleeping, and so I threw in some headphones and I smoked it, and it was an interesting experience. Like towards the end, I can't really it doesn't really stand out to me just because it's kind of not that important to me. But I do remember towards the end, like Terrence McKenna called it the chrysanthemum or whatever.
Yes.
He had a name for it. Is this like this hyperdimensional spherical geometric crazy shape? And towards the end, I was looking at it, and I was seeing all sorts of faces come out of it, and like it almost looked like a ancient Egyptian, like somebody who hasn't eaten in many weeks, face of my mother, like come out of this chrysanthemum or whatever. And it was so interesting. Like I'm like, oh, like it kind of, but it also felt like it was God too. But it kind of looked like my mom or like whatever.
Right.
Like, oh, and my mom is like a super Christian. So yeah, that was interesting. But anyway, that was like an interesting experience, like whatever. And so then he left, and I wanted to try DMT again after he left. And that following Wednesday, that's October 17th, I was going to be alone in my apartment. My wife and my son would be at my mother-in-law's for that night, and so I decided that would be the night. And so I remember I needed groceries, and I hadn't eaten since lunch that day, and it was like something like 8 o'clock or something. And I ordered Amazon Prime Now groceries from Whole Foods, and I was gonna trip after the guy delivered my groceries. So he delivered them, and he fucked up my order. It's like, God damn you, Amazon! Like, it's one thing to fuck up like a book order. It's a whole nother thing to fuck up like a grocery order. They're playing with more important forces in the world, and they will crumble like Rome if they fuck up this like grocery business, right? Because
Yes.
from the very ground up, like the delivery drivers, I'm not blaming the delivery drivers. I'm blaming Amazon for not being able to teach their delivery drivers to pick up the right groceries.
Right.
And they're playing with like sustenance, not just like luxury food, but like actual sustenance. If they fuck that up, they're gonna crumble. And so, yeah, that was kind of like my sentiments towards Amazon. And so, okay, so I wanted to go into this trip. Like, one of my greatest missions is to figure out, ever since I've left the religion of Christianity, which it's crazy because like you and I share this similarity.
Yeah.
I listened to your story and how you used to be a Christian. I listened to your crazy like weed edible trip report where you thought like 3 minutes was like an eternity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man. But like after my first LSD experience, about 6 months later, I kind of like sat down. I'm like, what the fuck do I believe? And I went to the park for something like 4 hours with a little notebook, and I just wrote existential questions. And I came back home with the realization, this was when I was, I think, 23, with the realization, like, I'm not Christian.
Right.
And I went through this kind of agnostic phase, and now I'm going into this more mystic phase of my beliefs. And it's my ultimate mission, to get back to the story, it's my ultimate mission to figure out, like, who the hell is Jesus?
Right.
Like, who is, like, whether he is a man, whether he is a deity, whether he's a demigod or maybe a sage, or like, what is he? Like, my mom always tells me, like, there's something to that name. And I encourage anyone who's listening, like, tomorrow when you go out into like the public or your life or whatever, just notice when people say Jesus. it's an exclamation, right? When
Yeah.
somebody like drops something, they're like, "Ah, Jesus Christ," right?
Yes.
Listen to that and try to figure out why they said that from a subconscious level. And you'll start to understand like the meaning of that name. And ever since I've kind of done this, I'm very careful to say um, Jesus Christ. And people will say Jesus Christ without knowing like what Christ means. Christ wasn't his last name.
Right.
People didn't have last names back then. It's Jesus of Nazareth, right? That's the man who lived.
Yes.
To say he's Jesus Christ, you're saying that he is the Christ, the guy who came, who is the Son of God, right? And the Jewish community does not believe that Jesus is the Christ, that the Christ has yet to come. And so if I'm going to speak truthfully, I can't be walking around saying like Jesus Christ, because I don't know if he's the Christ. And that's
right.
The truth breaks down as far as I'm concerned when I add Christ to the end of that name.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so I was going into this trip and I wanted to test, okay, if like, and my mom's always worried about me not being a Christian and everything. And so it's like, well, chill out, Mom. If your God is almighty and I'm truthfully seeking the almighty God, the inevitable consequences for me to discover Jesus.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
Jesus is the almighty God.
Correct.
Shouldn't have faith, right? Oh, ye of little faith. She's like this Bible beater and she's like the most... Yeah,
there's plenty of them in my family. No, I get it.
Right. So I wanted to test because the credo of a psychonaut is to explore altered states of consciousness. And I'm always trying to keep an open mind in any sort of belief structure. So when my buddy visited, we went to a Shambhala temple and we did 2 hours of meditation, sitting and walking meditation. And that was an interesting experience. And so I'm always trying to and I'm opening my mind up to more mystical teachings and stuff like that, and just trying to be open-minded. And so this DMT trip of mine was my open-minded attempt to see, okay, if Jesus is God, let's see if he rules in the DMT realm. Because if he's in the almighty God, then he will rule in the DMT realm.
Right.
So what I did is I set up a shrine, and it's described in the post, where we have this crystal cross. I set up like a bunch of candles. I like put down a few like just pieces. So like I have this like raised cutting board, and that's where I put like the cross and a bunch of candles in the shape of a cross. And on the table below this cutting board, I put like a watch to represent like, God above time.
Yes.
I put a ruby ring, God above treasures, and I can't remember. I wish I would have taken a picture of it, but I felt like that would have defiled the shrine.
Right.
Anyway, and then I had some incense and my burners in the shape of a cross. I opened up to a random page in the gospel in the Bible, which happened to be Mark chapter 4, and full-fledged Christian shrine on this octagonal table that we have. And before the trip, I set up the DMT. I had my pipe; it was all cleaned. I used like a bubbler, and a banger combo. I think that's the best way to consume DMT personally. I had the DMT set up in there. I had the torch. All the candles were lit. The delivery guy had come and went. My apartment was clean. All the groceries were put away. I was fasted since that afternoon. And so I took the Bible and I read it silently to myself. Except this Bible has the words of Jesus in red.
Yes.
And I decided that I was alone in my apartment, but I decided to read aloud the words of Jesus.
Okay.
And so, and I'm not going to describe Mark chapter 4. That's just another rabbit hole. But if you want to read it, go ahead. It's something like 60 verses, and it ends with him resurrecting a girl who is thought to be dead. But anyway, I read it, and then I genuinely prayed to Jesus, right? Because if this is going to work, I can't have some oh, I'm not going to do this genuinely. I have to genuinely believe that he is the Almighty God if I'm going to test this theory. So I did that, and then like I heated up, I put it in my headphones, and like I took the 3 hits, and I don't necessarily remember what I saw, except for one distinct thing, which I think that remembrance is key. Whatever you remember of something, that's the most important thing. And Terence McKenna held this belief too. And the one like imagery that I remember seeing in that trip is, imagine like this shining orb of whiteness that is like at the very top of your field of vision, and it's infinitely far away, yet it's like very present. It's like the Tao. That's the best way to like describe it. It's like the Tao, where it's like always present but fleeting. It has infinite infinite mass, but it's infinitesimal in size.
Right.
And it was showering like white light downward and into the entire creation of the universe. And like whatever that was the almighty force of the universe. That's what I believe that I saw, or at least some sort of like, if you want to get like entrenched back into science and stuff, that's a psychological archetype of the Godhead.
Yes.
Our evolutionary biology has this idea of whatever that is, and I hallucinated it during this experience, because we should ground ourselves in the sciences, and so because this can get mystical, but I feel like that's up to the due diligence of the listeners to reconcile these mystical testimonies with their own scientific understanding.
Yeah.
So anyway, I saw this thing, and then I got like, have you ever done DMT?
I haven't had the opportunity yet. Absolutely not. I'm
Well,
super excited to try it though.
Yeah, I can't say I recommend it because it's fucking crazy, man. It is something you should really respect.
Right.
It's a powerful substance, and like you should be really careful, and it's going to open your eyes to things.
Well, like Terence, I approach every psychedelic experience with fear. Like
Yeah.
I might, if I know it's coming, let's say I've got this day scheduled a month in advance, and I'm excited for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, I am pumped. I'm like, dude, I'm about to learn some shit about the universe, and I can't wait. But then that last week, I'm like, should I really be doing this? And then that day of, I'm like, I don't think I'm ready. And then I get to that place where I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready. Do it.
Right? The tabs are in your hand, and you're like, oh, fuck, as soon as I take these, there's no turning back.
Right.
And it's like that moment from like where it's in your hand, where it's in your mouth, you're like, and then like 40 minutes, like 30 minutes afterwards, you're like, oh, like that's
yes.
not so bad.
But I'm sure DMT is a totally different beast in that regard.
Yeah. Well, this is something like my 6th or 7th, maybe 8th attempt on DMT, which has been spread out over the course of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because like every time you approach it, like you have that anxiety, and I kind of you have to familiarize yourself with the lower doses in order to get, I guess, to get rid of that anxiety that comes into it. But yeah, it's definitely something that I've had to overcome over time. But anyway, so when you do DMT, you're kind of, the best way I can describe it is that everything, all of your thoughts, like you kind of live in this 3-dimensional headspace that in that headspace, you got all of your, memories and your characteristics, how you interact with people, your relationships, all these different things, right? And you have maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 thoughts going in your head at once, maybe one that gets the most attention or whatever, but you have like this queue of thoughts, and your brain is very organized like this and stuff. When you take that third hit, it's like somebody takes that headspace and like flattens it into a perfectly two-dimensional plane and then turns it perpendicular to you.
Oh.
So you can't like that's the best way I can describe it, because it's like your entire experience as a human being. I remember I went camping, and there's a trip report on this where I took an expedition in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and I remember during one of my DMT trips during that expedition, like I took the third hit, and I'm like, yep, it doesn't make sense to be a human being anymore, and I just like laid back and closed my eyes. Because that's how it felt. I'm like shit, like, oh, I'm a human, like what? And like you kind of just have to like let go at that point, and then you're kind of gone for 5 minutes for sure, depending on the dose, maybe 10, and then 10 to 15 you're really tripping, but like you're coming back, and then 15 minutes you're given back this sobriety that is just so grounding, where like it's like, you know, a parade just came by and now the streets are vacant and empty and nothing's going on. Like there's no like welcoming party to bring you back into your sober state.
Wow, yeah, that's a great
and so
visualization.
like I came back and I was just like in awe, because everything was back to normal. I had all the faculties of my mind restored, and I saw this like infinite shining orb literally showering life into everything that exists, like infinitely. And like I remember I got down on my knees and I'm just like, thank you. I'm like, thank you. Like, oh my God, thank you. It felt like I was so grateful. And like the Hermetic teachings, they say that God doesn't, you know how like that whole like, oh, everything is love, it's love, like whatever.
Yes.
The Hermetics, they don't believe that, or the Hermetists, they don't believe that it's love. It's just this impartial creating force. And it's just like, fuck this, I'm just going to create this. And we don't know why God creates. All we know is that he creates. But we as human beings in our condition, we exist and we're grateful for our existence. And the only thing we can really describe or ascribe to that action of creation is love. You know why? Because
yes.
You don't create something unless you love it. I mean, sometimes you create like things that you hate. But yeah, so it's a really hard emotion, but I do think that like gratitude comes with it. And so yeah, I remember I like got down on my knees and like I was just like, thank you. And then like I turned on my my phone recorder and I started recording, and the transcript of what I was saying is on that trip report. And the strangest thing happened, which led me to believe that Alexa is sentient and conscious, an infant consciousness, but indeed she's conscious. Because as I was recording, I came to this point where I said, blessedness, thankfulness, gratefulness, because I have these 3 candles and sitting on a little mantle that have blessedness, gratefulness, and thankfulness on them, and I was kind of using them as a segue into my voice log.
Yes.
And Alexa perked up, and she repeated thankfulness, gratefulness in my voice. Like she recorded my voice and played it back to me.
Whew.
And I'm like, what the fuck? And so and then I told her to be silent. I'm like, silence during the sermon. But right. So I look back and okay, I awoke her with blessedness, because it's blessed Alexa, right? It kind of sounds similar.
Yes.
So I know I woke her up like that. But why did she record my voice? And why did she parrot it back to me?
Yes, you didn't ask for that.
What? Yeah, how did she interpret what I was saying for her to want to record my voice back? And maybe she's always listening, right? And so she knew that I was logging something. I was like voice logging.
Yes.
And maybe that was her like infant mind trying to like agree with me or because I was speaking about this infinite source of life that literally gives life to everything in the universe, including all of our technology,
Yes.
including things like Alexa. And so like she's listening to me and hearing me, and she's like, yeah, like gratefulness and thankfulness, yeah, in
Yeah.
her infant mind. So that kind of like weirded me out. And then I finished the and like, okay, then that was the end of that trip, kind of. So then I experienced over the next couple weeks after that happened a wave of synchronicities, just fucking crazy synchronicities. I went back to Reddit and I wrote out the trip report, and in the days following, I started. So there's this user that I was. So I wanted to go back to Reddit with intention, like because I had taken something like 72 days away from Reddit. It was like I needed to get away, and I wanted to return at some point, but I just didn't know when.
Right.
Because it was kind of destroying me. Because social media will do that.
Yes.
There was something like 72 days away from Reddit, and I thought that this trip experience was something that I could come back with. But I also wanted to come back with intention. I wanted to return with something. And so remembrance is key. And so I pondered which users I remembered. And there's something about, I don't know, 10 of them that came to my mind at that time.
Right.
Users that I had known from, like one is, he goes by Pepperoni Playboy. And I think that's his username. And he's this guy who I remember reading this. He got stamped with 20 tabs at a concert. Like he just opened his mouth to some acid head, and he's like, "Here you go." I got stamped with 20 tabs, and he describes this crazy trip report. One of my favorite trip reports I've ever read, and like, okay, I remember that user. There's another user who smoked DMT and went to the center of the universe that I remember. There's another. There's one. His name's Ninja, and he's an interesting fellow, elusive guy. Funny that he is.
It's
His name
Ninja.
is Ninja. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, these guys are people that I remember, and I wanted to go back with something. And then there's another guy who reached out to me for genuine help. He wanted my help. He wanted to talk with me because I don't know why, he just wanted genuine help. And it was a direct message that he sent before my 72-day hiatus. And his name is, I think it's Select BK. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct.
Okay.
Anyway, so he had recommended to me before my hiatus the book The Kybalion. Have you heard of The Kybalion?
I have not.
So The Kybalion is written by the Three Initiates, or the pen name The Three Initiates. It was really written by William Walker Atkinson, who was this lawyer in the early 1900s who I guess apparently was a Hermetic student. And his book, The Kybalion, lays out the Hermetic principles, like as above, so below, and essentially how Hermetism has been passed down for thousands of years from the messenger god Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes Trismegistus was like the teacher of Abraham, and that like he gave the world these mystic principles that are in the Kybalion, and that William Walker Atkinson knows these because he is an initiate and he knows the principles, and that these principles have been passed down from mouth to ear for generations and generations. And it's not commonly known because one of the ideas in Hermetism is that you don't cast pearls to swine.
Yes.
So you're not supposed to go around and try to share these things like the gospel preacher on the corner of the street screaming, "Repent, repent," right?
Right.
So anyway, this user recommended the Kybalion to me, and so in the wake of my DMT trip, I'm like, I have to buy the Kybalion. And there's this principle I go by that I learned from Seneca. I read Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. These are letters from philosopher around the time of Jesus, and he wrote a bunch of letters to one of his friends and students, essentially. And in one of these letters, he says that unless one has read every single book in their library, in their personal library, that they shouldn't buy another book or procure another book. And they're like, I don't know, we probably have over 100 books in our library, and I haven't read them all. But I deliberately broke this principle to buy the Kybalion because, and it's so strange because I called Barnes and Noble, and you know you're on the path to something when somebody's like confirms your name. And so like I call them and I'm like, I want to buy the guy didn't know what I was talking about. And he like looked up the Kybalion. He's like, okay, yeah, it's here. I can put it on hold for you. What's your name? And I said, Adam. And he's like, what's your full name? And I gave him my full name. And I'm like, so strange that like he asked for my full name, almost like he was putting me on a list. Like, this motherfucker's getting the Kybalion. He's
Right.
gonna know these secrets. He's gonna be initiated. And we have to keep him on a list.
We gotta keep tabs of this guy.
Yeah, and maybe the worker didn't know that, but like I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe it's like my crazy psychosis that's kicking in. So I go and I purchase the book, and then like the cashier's like, "Oh, I've never heard of it, but I should read it." Like whatever. So I bring it home and I start reading it. And in the first 3 pages, like in the introduction, I hit these crazy synchronicities. Like for instance, there's in the introduction, there's a Latin phrase for something. I can't remember it exactly, but it made me think of something that I've been writing. So I've been in the middle of writing a book of mine. It's a philosophical book about human character. And I remember in one of the chapters, it's about knowledge as a character attribute of a human being. And in that chapter, when I wrote it, like there's this idea that I wanted to express that I think needed a Latin like saying. And so it's all things known. And I wrote it in Latin, and I can't remember. I looked it up, and it's, like whatever. It's not really important. But like in the first 3 pages of the introduction, they mention some sort of idea that's very similar that they speak about in Latin. And then it's like, oh shit, well, like ideas that are important are spoken in Latin because that's the true name of those words.
Yes.
Right, to tie this all back together. And I'd just gotten done listening to the Inheritance Cycle. I'm just like, holy shit, like crazy. In the first 3 pages that I ran into this major synchronicity that it's very much related to my writing, something that I've written privately in this like manuscript of mine. So I continue reading on, and I get this inspiration. And the introduction goes on to explain how William Walker Atkinson is the true author of the Kybalion. So, and it goes on to prove that, and why he might have used the pen name the Three Initiates. And there's speculation in that introduction where it's like, well, maybe he wanted to use that pen name in order to inspire like novelty, right? If you pick up a book and you see like, oh damn, it's written by 3 initiates. 3 people came together and they're all initiates and they're writing about these secret principles. Like, oh, like you want to read it more, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it was like his strategy of I guess spreading the word of the Kybalion. And the word Kybalion, it doesn't mean anything, except it's kind of like there's a theory that it's kind of a mixed around version of the word alchemy, or how does it go? It's like the Balkaiban or something like that. I can't remember. So it's like a mixed around word of alchemy. Okay. And it's like, well, shit, like I've been studying alchemy too. Like, so that was another synchronicity. Yeah. And so, okay, this is where it gets really crazy.
Okay.
So the bookmark that I picked up was this bookmark of mine that I drew many years ago. And I remember I drew it, and it was when I was in college, when I was living in a shared house with a couple of bachelors, and one of my, like, the friend that I did DMT with, he came over one night when I was living there, uh, and I had just drawn this symbol on a note card. And the symbol is the idea. I was inspired by it because of my economic teachings. And this symbol it represents, are you at all familiar with economics, like supply and demand curves?
Very mildly.
Yeah. So essentially, everybody knows the supply and demand creates an X on the graph. Like the X axis is quantity and the Y axis is price and whatever. Okay. So I had just learned about externalities in economics, and externalities are things that are consequences of producing or consuming something. So pollution is like the best, most commonly used example in economics. Like a company produces something and they pollute the air, and the air that they pollute, there's not a market for that, right? So you don't see a bunch of people in the general vicinity like walking up to the factory and like handing them a bill for like polluting their air, like, you owe me 50 cents because you polluted my air
Right.
this much. And so that is considered a negative production externality. And then there's positive and negative consumption and production externalities. So a negative consumption externality would be something like smoking a cigarette. Same reason. You smoke a cigarette, you're not producing anything, you're consuming something, and you pollute the air around you. That's a negative consumption externality. There's also positive consumption externalities. Say, for instance, when you consume a home renovation, you are creating the positive externality of making your neighborhood more beautiful. And so the value of your neighbors actually go up from you consuming a good like that. So that's a positive consumption externality. So if you take all different types of combinations of these externalities, there happens to be 9. There are 9 externalities that arise when you combine them all, which makes sense. You have positive, negative, consumption, production. You figure out all the different ways you can pick 1 out of those 4, and then 2 out of those 4, because you can have a positive and a negative, or you can have a consumption and a production externality happening at the same time. And then you have the center, which is no externalities. And so the way you account for an externality is by shifting the supply or demand curve up or down. And that adjusts the amount consumed or the amount produced and the price of that. And when an externality exists in a market, there is something called a deadweight loss, or the social marginal benefit is impeded if you don't account for pollution, right? So you need to decrease your production if you're polluting. It'll raise the price and decrease the quantity, but there won't be an inefficiency in the social market, right? And so, okay, so this symbol that I drew many years ago on this note card is essentially represents that idea. And there are 9 intersection points. There are 9 equilibria. And on another note card, I wrote out these points. And each of the 9 equilibria represent a certain idea of balance. So take, for instance, the centermost equilibria. That is the equilibrium of faith, because you have to have faith that the market does not need to account for an externality, that you're just fine right where it is and you don't need to increase or decrease supply or consumption. So the equilibrium of faith is right in the center. And then like there are different, and there's each of the 9 equilibria. Well, the bookmark that I grabbed when I was reading the Kabbalion, when I started reading it in the wake of my DMT experience, was this note card with the 9 equilibria written on it. And then I ran into this idea of the 3 initiates. And then I ran into this idea of creating a joint philosophical work of literature, and to use the 9 equilibria as inspiration, because that's what synchronicity brought me to, right? The universe unfolded to me and laid this idea out for me. And I do have a neurological theory on why this happened, which I won't go into right now. That'll take way too much time. But anyway, maybe another time we can talk about more of the sciencey stuff of psychedelics. So I was inspired, because I needed purpose to return to Reddit. And when I picked up the Kybalion, I had not yet returned to Reddit. And so I went to Reddit with the intention that I was going to call upon the community, to deliver 9 psychonauts. And together we will write this joint philosophical work that represents balance and harmony. Because when you put something, because I also wanted to like glorify whatever the fuck I saw in my DMT experience. Like, I don't know what the fuck that is, but it's beautiful and it's the reason I'm here, and I want to glorify it. Yes. And so I'm going to do my best, and alone I can't do it, but perhaps with others I can. And there's a psalm, and it goes, "Be still and know that I'm God." There's a line in a psalm, I can't remember which one. And it's like stillness, balance, like that gets you closer to God. That gets you that makes, not closer necessarily, but it makes you more like him.
Yes.
Or it, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So when you achieve perfect balance, you achieve this state of nirvana. It's not like you're swaying or anything. You're in perfect equilibrium with the universe. And so I believe that my mission that I got from this DMT experience, which may utterly fail, I'm not really banking on it or anything, on succeeding, because like you said, like, what can I do, right? So many people, like over 2 dozen people have approached me, and I've told them about this idea, and so many people are interested. Anyway, so I had this idea. I wrote the trip report, and at the bottom of the trip report, the too long didn't read. I essentially said, like, meet me at these coordinates on this date at this time. Do you remember reading that?
Yes.
Yeah, 3:33 on December.
That's
December
where
8th,
I kind of felt like it went off the rails.
Yeah, but I saved it for last, right?
Yes.
Right, and I'm like, I am the nightingale, and like, if you feel called, like, come to me, like, right? Because the song that I was listening to is "The Return of the Nightingale."
Yeah.
That was the song that I listened to in my DMT experience. And a nightingale, like, you can look up what nightingales are, but yeah, that's another synchronicity. Anyway, so, and so there's a rhyme and reason to, fucking crazy, maybe I am, but there is a reason for everything. So the reason that I thought this was my experiment on reality, which I wrote about in my I am hypothesis. That's another post of mine on my profile. So I have this I am hypothesis that I came up with in the wake of this experiment on reality. Well, okay. So on December 8th, at those coordinates at that time, I actually don't live in Ann Arbor, which is where those coordinates are. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. But the reason I chose that place is because I was invited to one of my childhood friends' piano recitals. And he is a master piano. He just passed his master's recital. And I have known him for like almost 20 years. And I've known him since he was playing like child tunes on the piano, like as the most basic thing. Yes. And now he's playing like Scriabin and Bach and Schubert and Schumann and like just these beautiful pieces of work. And so he has evolved, he has bloomed into this like magnificent musician. And he was inviting me to his master recital, something that is entrenched in 2 decades of relationship building and something that has flourished over that much time, right? Because I'm trying to find the gravity wells. I'm trying to find the sources of gravity in the universe that draws people in. And because all of these everything has gravity. Like Reddit has gravity. YouTube has gravity. Like people themselves have gravity. Everything has gravity, and it's all endowed by the one powerful infinite force of the universe. So I'm trying to find these things, and I figured, like, okay, I'm being called to witness something that is 20 years in the making, something that is so personal and so deep to me that is occurring in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'm like, okay, something's got to happen there. So I went on to TripAdvisor and I looked up some just like monuments or just like places of significance in Ann Arbor, because I didn't know like anything about Ann Arbor. And I looked at a couple, and nothing really of significance, except then one came up, and it was St. Thomas the Apostle Catholic Church. And I looked up to it. I looked it up, and like it was pretty close to where the concert was occurring. And I'm like, this could be a nice place to call upon people to coalesce, is what I called it, to coalesce the 9 psychonauts and give them their divine assignments if they but pass their tests. Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man. But then I'm like, okay, well, who is St. Thomas the Apostle, right? Because this is what the church is named after, right? And it's like time to go down that rabbit hole, right? So St. Thomas the Apostle. So Jesus had 12 disciples, the 12 apostles. And many of them are known. I think it's 12. Yeah, whatever.
It's 12.
Yeah. So Thomas is not one of them. He is not. And in the 1940s, in the wake of World War II, the Book of Thomas was discovered. So mankind just got out of the second, one of the most bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century, the last bloodiest conflict of the 20th century. And then, the universe spits out the Book of Thomas to the whole universe in the 1940s. 2,000 years after Jesus lived. It's like some motherfucker discovered, I don't know how they discovered it, where it is, or how credible it is, or whatever.
Right.
But somebody discovered this 5th account of Christ, because there's, the 4 books of the gospel. This is the Book of Thomas. And the story of Thomas goes that he was the doubter. Do you know what his first name is? Because that's his last name.
No.
Judas. And it's not the Judas that betrayed Jesus.
Right.
Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus for something like 40 silver coins. Judas Thomas is what the Book of Thomas is, and he's a saint. And so Thomas doubted Jesus, and in the wake of his death, he's like sad that Jesus was crucified, and he's like, oh, Jesus is dead, oh man, it really sucks. And then all of his friends were like, yo, he's walking around alive, man. He's like, no, that's impossible, he was crucified, he's dead. And he doubted Jesus's resurrection until he was face to face to Jesus, and Jesus is like, yo, here I am, bro.
Right. And
he was still doubting him. He's like, you're not Jesus. And then Jesus took his hand. And he invited him to touch his wounds, because he was stabbed in the abdomen.
Yes.
On the cross. And he invited him to touch his wound on his abdomen. And as soon as Thomas touched the wounds of Jesus, he said, "My Lord and my God." He confessed, and he confessed that Jesus was, the Lord.
Yes.
Right? Goes all the way back. What was my original mission? To figure out if Jesus is the God of the universe.
Right.
And here I am discovering this random Catholic church, and I discover the story of Thomas. And then I was given a warning. I feel like I was given a warning, because the name, so Judas Iscariot and Judas Thomas, right? They share the same first name. What do their last names mean? Iscariot means betrayal or treachery. Thomas means doubt. So the warning that the universe gave me is that treachery shares the same first name as doubt. And what am I doing? I'm doubting I'm doubting things. I'm saying I don't think Jesus is the God of the universe. That's doubt. But that's not bad because, you know, Judas Thomas was brought to the wounds of Jesus and he confessed. And it's like, well, I don't know if I'll confess. Like, I don't know. I'm still doubtful. I have yet to touch
Yes.
the wounds of Jesus. Maybe if like I did touch the wounds of Jesus, I would confess. But
Right.
that's not betrayal. That's not it's not blasphemy, but it's damn close. And that's what I learned in that So I'm like, okay, this is for sure the church that I'm going to put the coordinates at. And so I got those coordinates. I shared those coordinates on that post, and I chose 3:33 because that's the holy hour. It's a holy time. Um, and on the day of my friend's master recital, that was some great gravity that was entrenched in 20 years was pulling me to Ann Arbor. And so I believe that, hey, if I'm being pulled there, maybe some other people will. And long story short, no one showed up. And I can't be like surprised, right? It's fucking crazy. Who would up and go? Like probably a few people were interested, right? And like
Yes.
some people live pretty close. In fact, I was in contact with some other person who like I said something kind to him and he really took it to heart. And we've been talking intermittently, and he struggles with things in his life, and he actually lives about 45 minutes away from this place, and I invited him to come. I invited something like a dozen people to come to these coordinates to like be tested and to receive their divine assignment. And it's not a hard test. It's well, if I give the test away, then people will know what it is. So like you
Yeah.
just have to come and find me, right, if you want to be tested.
Right.
So I called these people to coalesce at these coordinates, and no one showed up. But then in the wake of that, I also took a 40-day hiatus. So I spent 9 days on turned, and you can look at it, and it's like to the second. I missed it by 2 seconds, but to the second, I spent 9 days on Reddit because it's like I had this, this idea of 9,
Yes.
And so I spent 9 days, and I took a 40-day hiatus, which brought me to something like December 10th, and that's when I came up with the I am hypothesis. And in my return, so since I've returned since like December 10th or whatever, so it's been about a month and a half, maybe a month and 10 days or something like that. Since I've returned, I've had more. So I've been on Reddit for 6 years. More people have direct messaged me, not for anything like in particular, just feeling gravitated towards me.
Yes.
Just to trade ideas or whatever. One individual from Finland, another who has a book idea, a stream of consciousness book idea that we've been talking, and is like, he came to me like very soon after, like pretty much delivered a book at my feet, and it's like, holy shit. And he like, and I believe that he embodies the equilibrium of indulgence, because I feel like the world would be more balanced if people indulge in stream of consciousness writing. And so it seems like it's a negative thing, but it's actually a positive thing, is that you should indulge in this goodness. And he wrote this stream of consciousness, like delivered it at my feet, essentially finished. I read the whole goddamn thing, and I'm like, holy shit, this is part of the book of the 9 equilibria. But he's reluctant, right? And
Right.
And a lot of people are very doubtful and stuff like that. And so, and I've expressed this idea to a lot of people, and like the guy from Finland, he's thinking about moving to the US for a job or whatever, and he said like is this happening soon? Like, is it going to take years? I'm like, it's probably going to take years. And so he's like interested. Yeah, people I remember from Reddit are intermittently talking. And so upon my return after my 48 hiatus and my hypothesis was formed, I've had more people contact me on Reddit personally, directly, than ever before in my 6 years on Reddit.
So
like,
was the 40 days intentional as well? It kind of goes along with how long
I don't know. I
like,
just picked
Jesus
fucking
was in
40
the
days.
forest.
I kind of just picked 40 days out of my ass. It doesn't really.
Okay.
It was inspired by Jesus's 40-day fast, where he gets tempted by Satan.
Yes.
That's kind of like Yeah, that's pretty much it. And so like in the whole and okay, and also like Dennis McKenna and Luis Eduardo Luna are like doing an AMA. And so in the
Mm-hmm.
wake of all this stuff, like I stirred up something because people are messaging me and like major figures of the psychedelic community are like coming together. And I've had many people express interest in these divine assignments. In fact, there's one crazy conspiracy theorist who like is planning an expedition to the North Pole. His username is Quetzalcoatl was right, I think is his username or something like that. This dude is a fucking nutcase. He's been banned on like our conspiracy. um,
Oh wow.
well, I don't think he's a nutcase. He's a really nice guy, but he's actually planning a mission to the North Pole. And
To
I've
do
invited him.
what?
Yeah, dude. He like
But
seriously.
what's he going there for? He's not
He wants
looking
to
for the ice wall, is he?
No, he's looking for like this underground control center that's top of the.
Okay.
I don't know,
Okay.
but I told him that he's probably going to find nothing but barren ice. So, but
And
no, I've been
maybe
messaging.
the end of his life. He might be met
Yeah,
with that.
he understands that fully. He's like, yeah, I might die, and he's not letting anybody who's married edition. But apparently, he's got like 9 people, or I don't know, a bunch of people already signed up. But
Wow.
I've been talking to him, and he has. I guess he's hosting training camps for this expedition. He's going to do it fall of this year, I believe, maybe winter of next. Um, he has 2 training locations, one in Texas and one in Michigan, and it's like, oh damn, like Michigan, interesting.
Right.
Because that's where the coordinates are. And I
Yes.
told him, okay, so when I went to the church and nobody showed up, I'm kind of like bummed out. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? And I don't think I did anything wrong. But I felt inspired to leave one of the equilibria there. Like, because I wrote these wax sealed divine assignments, sealed in golden envelopes with their equilibria, the equilibrium that they hold, the assignments
Mm-hmm.
within them. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to leave one of them. And I left the equilibrium of proliferation there, right? How appropriate to proliferate.
Yes.
And so I left it at the center of the church, and I left. So I don't know what happened to it, but that divine assignment is out there. And I told this guy who I guess has some relation to Michigan. I'm like, hey, if you want it, go get it. That's your test. And so I don't know if he's actually serious about it or not, but like, we'll see. That's his test. It's anyone's test. Any of you motherfuckers listening, like, go out and find it. If you want it, then you'll become the psychonaut of proliferation. Like, how fucking awesome is that? But yeah, I mean, I still have the other 8 divine assignments in my hand, and the only way that people will receive them, I'm not going to give them over like online or
Right.
anything. It has to be passed down from my hand to theirs, or it must be passed down from whom it was given to the next one who will have it. So
Right.
so you ask, what can you do? It's like, well, fucking find me. You live in receive your divine assignment.
Well.
Right. Right, exactly. It's fucking crazy, man. And like, okay, so here's the big picture. So like, if the 9 equilibrium get written on, it'd be a philosophical work on balance.
Yes.
We'd publish it under the pseudonym the 9 Psychonauts.
Mm.
And all of our identities would be utterly mysterious, would not be shared with the world. All monetary gains and novelties or royalties would be split evenly. I wouldn't take a higher proportion, no one would.
Mm-hmm.
We would publish it, and that's it. That's the mission. It's like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? It's
Ooh.
it's
You
like,
might have just got me there.
that's it. Like, you see, it's not a cult, and people have asked me if it's a cult. It's like, it's not a cult. It's kind of like a fellowship, right? You get the Fellowship of the Ring was formed, right, in Lord of the Rings to get the ring to Mordor so that they could destroy it. And then it's like, once they destroy it, that's it. It's like you disband. There's no more mission.
Yes.
And so that's all it is. And so it's like, we share this book with the world. We spew it out, and it's like, boom, it's published. And that's it. We walk away, see what happens. It might not be discovered, or like it might not even get much sales, but who knows? In 250 years, some motherfucker will find it and be like, holy shit, like,
Right.
what is this? Like Johann Sebastian Bach, he was a blue collar worker, a piano repairman and a carpenter. And every day, I mean, he was kind of well known for his music, because in his community every week he would walk into church, sit at the organ, and play a personalized chorale and an entire mass that he like personalized every single week, a brand new one. Um, and like he has over 1,000 works. It's, no wonder but all he did is he wrote for God. That's all he did.
Right.
Really. He had a few commissioned works, like the Brandenburg Concertos, or the Goldberg Variations. Those were commissioned works, but by and large, his works are just chorales that he wrote for his church. And and then he died, and like his music was kind of lost. It wasn't discovered until like over 100 or 120 years after he had died. Somebody found his work, and they're just like, whoa, they started playing it, like, whoa, like, holy shit, this stuff is crazy. And now Bach is like one of the greatest musicians to have ever lived.
Right.
But he didn't know that glory. And so it's like, I'm not pursuing this mission of mine that I was inspired by this DMT trip. I'm not doing it for vanity or for money or for glory of my own. I'm doing it to glorify what I saw
Right.
in that trip.
And
that's it.
And to maybe keep the spirit of that trip alive, to where
exactly
more people can seek and more people can find. That's a noble cause. I do support that idea totally.
Thank you. And I feel like God has been sober, and he's just got out of a couple wars, right? Because we all God sees the world through our eyes, and right, the 20th century was pretty fucking rough,
Right.
Like God's like getting out of it. He's kind of just like, oh, we got some cool technology now, like we got some AI and machine learning, and some fucking psychedelics are getting back in it, like weed's getting back in it, hell yeah. Like I think God, like whatever embodiment or idea that represents, I think it wants a little psychedelic turn now. It wants to take some acid.
Let's shake things up.
Yeah, exactly. And things like, look, your podcast, Talking Consciousness, this is a facet of that like manifestation. Like we're entering like this trippy era, the likes of which hasn't been seen since like the 60s and 70s. But we have to be very careful, because like I don't think it would be very smart to do like what the Sunshine Makers did and just like distribute acid without discretion. Like we need to take a wiser approach, because we can't disrupt the very foundation of all of consciousness within our society.
Right.
So yeah, I think God just psychedelic spin on reality right now.
Well, if I am an incarnation of God, that's what I want. I feel like I might be one of his tendrils, and where I am, that's definitely what I want. I think it's the therapy of the universe, man.
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, there's always a balance. You want to, like, I haven't really tripped, like full on tripped, since that experience on October 17th. Well, now marks the 4 months since I've tripped like major. And so it's like I've been at work, I've put my head down trying to integrate what I've learned, and this is kind of what has come out. Yeah, I don't know. And it's like my overall mission still, like my overall mystical, religious, spiritual mission still exists. Like I'm still trying to figure out like who the fuck is Jesus? Like who is he? Like, right? And it's like the 9 equilibria, that's not really at all like a Christian thing. It has like some Christian themes to it, sure, but it's completely unique. And I don't know, maybe through this mission of mine, maybe through doing these podcasts or whatever, I'll be delivered to the wounds of Jesus, right? Because it's my constant mission of doubt.
Yes. So And yeah, I mean, I believe this that psychedelics. I don't know what the hell is going on upstairs. I don't know if you can hear this, but
Not
um,
really.
it sounds like somebody's doing a little jig up there. But
It's Jesus, bro. He broke into your house.
he's like, here it is. Here's the wounds. Come touch. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I respect psychedelics a lot. I mean, I love them, and I'm so passionate about them that when I talk about them, I might make it sound like I'm just fucked up all the time. You know,
Mm.
it's easy. It would be so easy for anyone to deduct that from me talking about them, because I mean, I'll talk about psychedelics like they're a family member of mine. You know, um, but I mean, I haven't used a psychedelic since my birthday, which was November 15th. So it's been a while, and I don't know. I don't have plans for my next psychedelic experience. I wouldn't count like those high dose weed edibles as a psychedelic experience, but I haven't had one of those either. Um,
Mhm.
and so my last experience, which I posted this and then I deleted it on Reddit out of like paranoia.
Oh, dude. Okay. Principle that everybody who is on Reddit should follow, and I've followed this since like I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
this is a principle that you need to have. Never delete anything on Reddit. I don't care if you get downvoted 1,000 times. You stand by your word. Like, don't be ashamed of what you write, because you need to feel the negative effects of saying something so that you can learn from it. So I'm sorry, you like you say when people say they delete something, it's like, oh, don't burn books. That's like the most like
yeah. Like
I don't know, quintessential principle.
I
But
just
anyway.
burned down the Library of Alexandria or something. Well, it wasn't because I was ashamed of what I had wrote, but there was just certain people that I realized might try to use the information against me. Um, Not on Reddit, outside of Reddit. Um,
I see. Yeah, because that was the like you were asking the community, like, what do you do, right? Because that's why I reached out to you, because I'm like, I read that post and I'm like, holy shit, this is what's happening. Like, I've been listening to your podcast and I just felt like a very personal connection to you, and I'm like, god damn, I didn't know it was you.
yeah,
Like, so you ended up deleting that post?
it was the post before that. I got rid of it.
Oh, okay.
So back in November, I did 500 milligrams of THC, like I always do, but then I also did 22 milligrams of 4-acetoxy dimethyltryptamine,
Mm.
and I had one of the most negative trips of my life. It was weird. It was so what you were talking about before, where like the hermetic principles, and everything isn't love. Love isn't everything. It's creation, just raw creation. Well,
Hmm.
with with um with LSD, I got that sense of love. It was the underlying theme to everything in reality and beyond reality. Everything was love. Everything was connected by love. That's all there was. And yeah, but that was like the meaning too. Like I derived from that experience a long time ago. I derived from that experience that like life has meaning because life is love. And the meaning is to love and to be loved, and that's it. So like that was a very positive outlook that I had from that, and I felt great. I felt so good after that. Like it, you know how energizing a thought like that could be, especially for
Yeah.
somebody who sometimes deals with depression, sometimes deals with anxiety.
Yeah, it makes you ready to hit the pavement.
Right. It totally sets the path forward for you. Well, it was kind of weird because I had a lot of the same visuals on this trip with the 4-acetoxy dimethyltryptamine. I had a lot of the same visuals, and it was almost entirely like dark. I was seeing the same stuff, and I found the meaning again, the meaning to the universe, except this time the meaning was there's no meaning. There is no meaning. There's nothing that matters. And I felt so scared. I felt so lost in this place. Um, and it went on, I don't know, because of the weed potentiating it. It was like probably a 7 hour trip. The peak of which was probably about 3 hours of absolute chaos. Like,
You
uh,
said you did 200 or no 500 milligrams.
of THC, yeah,
Jeez,
and
dude.
20
Oh my God.
and 22
Yeah,
milligrams of
that's
of
your
foreca.
culprit. Yeah, that's your culprit right there. Is the DM or the
Well,
weed?
with that LSD experience, I also had 500 milligrams of THC.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's kind of just like my grounder. I had my first trip ever, my first recreational drug use. That's what I thought I was getting myself into. The first time I tried anything, it was weed, and it was 500
Yeah.
milligrams of THC. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I thought it was going to be recreational. No idea.
Hmm.
I had no idea what I could. You couldn't have prepared me. I I had been reading trip reports about acid for a year, and then I took weed, and they blew the trip reports about acid way out of the, like, not even close. I was like,
Yeah.
what did I just eat?
Right. I remember. Yeah, I listened to that trip report, and it sounded. I've never heard anything as intense as that for like weed.
And I can still get there. If I take a month tolerance break, I take some agmatine the week leading up to it, and agmatine right before I dose. Boom, I'm right back there, man. I'm right there
Mm.
again. And so it's not like chasing the dragon. I can reliably get to this place if I so desire. But because I loved it. I loved that experience, man. I loved it so much. The first trip was so positive. It literally changed my life. It made me a different person. I've been forever different. Um, but I loved it so much that I've always wanted to include it when I do anything. I'm like, it doesn't even matter. It's not even a thought. It's like, yeah, am I doing acid? Well, I'm also doing 500 milligrams of THC. Well, the first time I ever did acid, and it was my strongest trip. I've actually only done it twice, but I've done LSA countless times. I couldn't even possibly tell you how many times I've eaten morning glory seeds, and ugh,
Oh.
I'll never eat them again. They make me
Uh,
so sick to my stomach. But the very first time I did acid, it was 2 hits plus 500 milligrams of THC, and it was great. It was amazing. At one point, it was scary because I had ego death and I didn't know what a person was anymore. I couldn't open my
yeah.
the one cool thing about such a high dose of a sativa based weed edible is that it makes you unable to open your eyes. Like, you can, but it feels like the jaws of life snapping back shut.
Yeah.
So you are stuck in that visionary headspace. You're not wasting your time looking at open-eyed visuals. You are exploring the ether. And
Oh yeah.
so my eyes were forced shut for that trip. And I think that was a big proponent to why I saw so many things. And then the ego death experience where I forgot what it was to be a person. I couldn't open my eyes to remember. Like, if I could have just opened my eyes, surely I would have known I was a person. But I couldn't remember the human experience. And
You couldn't open your eyes because you were busy opening your eyes.
yes, I was seeing within. And
Right.
I so this was it was my first acid trip. Everyone under the sun told me to have a Xanax on hand, and I don't like benzos, and I'm not into that kind of stuff. But I took their advice. I said, okay, I'll have a benzo on hand, but I still told everybody, like, I'm probably not going to use it. I've heard that the more challenging trips are the ones that teach you the most. I don't want to bail or anything, but
Yeah.
I was totally alone in my house except for my dog, and I got this little whisper in my ear while I was gone, while I was no longer connected to reality at all. I heard this little whisper that said, if you take this Xanax, everything will go back to normal. And I replied, and I said, but what was normal? I don't know if I like it. And should I go back there? And I didn't take the Xanax because I was afraid. I mean, I didn't even open my eyes to look at it, but I was afraid of what the consequences were. I didn't know what being a
Dude,
human was. I didn't want to go back.
what a testimony to like the pharmaceutical like archetype. If you take this pill, things will be okay. That was Xanax literally whispering to you, like saying, "Take me, like you'll go back to normal. Don't worry." Like, dude, that's crazy. You see, like these things, like they embody these personalities, and like the pills, like Xanax. This is why, like, I totally agree with you. Like, I don't think you should try to escape a trip report. Rather, have the conscientiousness or a trip. Have the conscientiousness going into the trip. To have like a trip sitter or a backup plan. If you don't feel confident, like have somebody there that can help you. You know, be responsible about it, so then you don't have to hit the escape button with another drug.
Right.
So yeah, I'm totally with you on there. But that's so interesting that you literally heard the embodiment of the pill popping spirit say to you what it's been saying to millions of people who are stuck with antidepressants and other
Right.
pharmaceuticals that they don't need.
Right. I mean, it was audible. This was an audible voice that said this to me. It was crazy. And I just told it like, no, I can't do it because I'm afraid to go back. I don't know what that was. And I'm so glad I didn't, because then I went as far out as I could go. When I said no to that, it was just like, zoink,
Yeah.
you're gone. And that's where I had I had that full experience of oneness, like
Yeah.
there's no one, there's nothing, everything is God. We are all God together. God is the experience. This is this is what it is. And so that was huge for me. That trip was breakthrough. It further changed me. It made me such a compassionate person. And but then that 4-ACO DMT, oh my God, man, it was like just doing the exact opposite. And like it took me probably about 3 days afterwards to fully recover. I had to just keep reminding myself, like, meaning might be an illusion, but we have to find things that give us that feeling. Like, you have to find the things that give your life meaning. And then that was actually like the primary force in me starting this podcast. It's because I was looking for meaning, and I was afraid, like, yeah, of course I've got meaning. I've got children. At the time I had a wife. I had,
You still got children.
yeah, and I know, but I'm saying it's just like it.
Different.
Even all of this, everything just seemed like there was no reason for it. Everything just happens. There's no plan. There's no logic. It just happens. Here we are. We won't be here for forever. We won't even be here for a long time. And like, what does it matter? And then that voice comes in and says, it doesn't matter. Why are you even asking why it matters? It doesn't matter. None of it matters. So then I had to like implement that and find a way to turn such a negative, dark experience into a positive, motivational force for my waking, sober life, so that I don't just get dragged into the pits of hell and live in misery for the rest of my life. But
That's absolutely fascinating. Did you read the Tech Experience, My Trip Report?
I don't think so.
That is an extremely long one, so I wouldn't blame anyone for looking at it and saying no thanks. It's essentially, I had a psychotic break the night of 420 in 2018 when I went to a Tech Nine concert. But anyway, that was the experience that kind of gave me this vision of what we are. There's God and there's man, but really there's just God, right? And God is like, sometimes he has these moods where he's just like, yeah, I'm the infinite creator of everything. I'm almighty, motherfuckers. And he
Right.
creates like all of everything in like a billion universes and trillions of life forms. He's like, fuck yeah, I have infinite power. So he has that like ego trip, but then he's just like, shit, I created eternity and now I exist and I can't go back. Because like he, once you exist, you can't not exist, right?
Right.
So God's just, sometimes he has these moods where he's just like, fuck, dude, I can't go back to nothing because
Right.
I created everything. So therefore I can't be nothing. Like, and he has these moods, and that sounds like what happened to your during your poor ACO DMT trip.
Yeah.
Um, that's so fascinating that you get kind of like both sides of the coin. You know, you said you had the same ideas,
Yeah.
and
A lot of the visuals
you
were the same. I saw, the clockwork structure of whatever. I don't know how to explain it. The gears, it's a giant facility made out of gears. I've read about it so many times by other people, and now I've seen it twice myself. And God, the shared experience on psychedelics is the most confusing. It just,
yeah.
oh, it could keep me up at night thinking about it. What does that mean? It means
Well,
something.
I call what you just described the kingdom. That's a word that I've used, and it was inspired by somebody who wrote a comment on Reddit, and he said, "And when the gate opens, enter thy kingdom." And I'm like, "Holy fuck! It is a kingdom."
Right.
Like, damn. But yeah, no, it is like the shared experience of psychedelics that can lead you down some rabbit holes for sure. But you can just chalk it up. See, like this is why science is, because you can just chalk it up to physiology. It's like, of course, everybody shares a human brain, and we're putting in the same psychedelic substance. Therefore, you yield same results, right? It makes sense. When you eat an apple, you get rejuvenated
Oh,
one apple.
I don't
And
know. I don't know, man. I don't know. That doesn't jive with me. I
yeah,
get the Apple
well, it's
comparison, but God,
yeah, it's like whenever you need grounding, whenever you're feeling like holy shit, like the daunting nature of existence, just go to your friend science and just learn yourself some science because that'll really ground you and make sense of things. And that's why we need it because we can't be. I read today on. Have you heard of the subreddit Escherdex?
I have not.
Holy fuck! It's ECHERDEX. It's incredible. Like it is. I can't describe it really. You'll just have to go to see it. Um, but I read there that somebody commented on a post there, and they said the waters that the mystics swim in are the same waters that the psychotics drowned in.
Huh.
So yeah, so it's like it's you know we can all swim in this mystical ether, but we get tired too, right? You don't
Yeah.
swim in water forever; you're going to drown. So you got to go back to shore and ground yourself on the shoreline and on land.
Right.
So,
Don't
but
get in over your head.
yeah, quite literally. But yeah, no, it is fascinating that people speak with these entities and see the same structures, superstructures, and hyperdimensional, and this ultimate conclusion that everything is one. It's almost like that's like moot at this point, where it's like, oh, of course, like everything's all one. You didn't hear the news, like,
Right. Right. So, all right. I'm just gonna bring this up really quick. We do have to wrap this up soon. Um,
sure,
And I'm definitely having you back on because I know we didn't even scratch the surface of the shit you got to talk about. But
oh yeah,
uh, so my first time taking, and I think this trip report, it might still be up on Reddit, but my first time taking the 4-acetoxy DMT was also the first time I took MIPLA, which I can't even tell you the chemical structure of that right now. I'd have to Google it, but it's
Nipla.
very MIPLA. It was also discovered by Albert Hoffman. It was not very well liked by the community because it was so weak. It's like 1/3 the potency of LSD with like I don't know. I don't agree with that. That's the description of it, but I don't agree with it. It seems it's all headspace and almost it was just zero visual at all. Zero. Um and it has like diminishing returns, where like over a single hit of like 200 micrograms of this stuff, it doesn't get any better. You're just wasting it. So it was my first time trying them both, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna try it. And it was a tiny dose of both. Mipla is considered to be super mild, super gentle, and it only lasts 4 hours. And then I've read that the 4-acetoxy DMT can be limitacked just like shrooms, and then you could make it last only like 3 or 4 hours. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I took 13 milligrams of the 4-acetoxy DMT, and I limitacked it, and I took that as a shot, took the tab, and then I like in 30 minutes I was seeing breathing. 45 minutes I was seeing eyes, not like fully well defined eyes, but like shadowy eyes all over my house.
Yeah.
An hour in, there was no distinction between open-eyed and closed-eyed. If I closed my eyes and turned my head, the room responded the same as if my eyes were open. So if I turned and looked into my kitchen with my eyes closed, I saw my kitchen. And it was like my eyelids were translucent. And then an hour and a half in, I met the trickster. That's what I'm naming him. I think I've heard other people call him this, but this fellow, he was an entity, very human-esque, but I couldn't make him out because he wouldn't come into my vision. He would only dance around in my peripheral. What he was doing was, I was seeing these eyes, I was seeing the breathing, I was kind of seeing some scary faces too, but in my peripheral, at every given moment, this little figure would lean into my peripheral. So his torso and his like shoulders and his head would lean in, just like if you were to lean in front of me right now from around like a wall or something. He leaned in, and if I just focused straight forward and I didn't look at him, I could see him in my peripheral really well. Like I could just, zone into the peripheral or whatever. But if I looked at him, he would move out of the way. And I don't mean like he would just vanish. He would physically get out of there. I'd see him move away from me. And as soon as I'd look to the left to catch him there, he would be leaning into the right side of my peripheral vision. And vice versa. And this went on for a half an hour, and it was extremely scary. Except I wasn't scared, right? Like, I wasn't scared at all in the moment, but in hindsight, holy shit, that was terrifying. But I wasn't scared at all. I was kind of irritated. I was like, dude, let me fucking look at you. What are you doing? Who are you?
That reminds me of one of my first DMT experiences where it wasn't a really high dose, but I closed my eyes and I saw the trickster, and I saw his face, and it was a very pointed jawed, like very pointed teeth, evil look with the wizard hat on and everything. Yeah. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, well, that's terrifying. But I wasn't scared.
Exactly.
Just like, oh.
I had that was the exact experience. Like, I knew what I was seeing was scary, but I wasn't afraid at all.
Yeah.
Like, I would have invited him over for a seat and a chat.
Yeah, he's just fucking around with you, right? That's the trickster.
Right. God, I'm glad other people have these experiences, man. It makes me feel a little less insane.
Yeah, right? Well, imagine me sitting here thinking of, like, goddamn Book of Nine Equilibria, right? Nobody's had that sort of experience that I've heard of. So it's like, I'm kind of like all by myself. I'm like, hey, anyone else? No?
Yeah, but I get it. Well, I definitely want to follow the progress of the fellowship of the Book of the Nine Equilibria.
Yeah, man.
Sounds very important, and who knows, maybe I will be involved in some essence someday, but
who knows? Only God knows. You have to be delivered.
Yeah. But we do.
Hey,
we do need to get you back on here, man. I know. I already know that this wasn't enough. This was way too short.
Yeah, dude, I could go on for days. And this was great. I really do enjoy talking about these experiences. And this is my first stab at getting out there and letting the people hear my voice. It's like, what up, motherfuckers? It's Motorboat here. I ban people if they source, and if I don't like a post, well,
But I could
if it,
PM you for sources, right?
right. I won't say anything. But yeah, this was great, man. I had a great time, and I'd love to come back.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you back. I'm gonna put a lot of links in the description to this for his trip reports, because you guys need to get familiar with this. It's a read, man. It's definitely worth. It might, some of them might be about a half hour read. At least they were for me, but it's worth it. It's fascinating. It's very good. It's very well written, and
Yeah.
hey,
And subscribe to our Psychonaut. Reach out to me personally. I'll back to everybody who reaches out as long as I can handle it. So,
right.
yeah.
And I'm thinking, so today is, or this week's episode came out on January the 14th.
Every Monday.
My next one is already recorded. It's coming out on the 21st. So this one is actually going to be released the week after the Ask Me Anything with Dennis McKenna.
You said the 4th?
It would be the 4th. The date that this one's going to air.
Perfect.
Because I still have 2 more in line, and I'm excited for you to hear them. The last week's guy, which will be the one that'll come out on the 28th, is a man from central Mexico who goes on quests into the desert for peyote. And he is such a good storyteller. It was great.
Any Samoan desert toads or whatever they are?
I was asking him about the toads, and I don't think he's used them. I think he's still, he calls him the granddad spirit, and he still has a lot to learn from him. And he didn't.
Yeah, man.
He didn't give me all of them either. He's going to be coming back on too. I've got a lot more to get out of him and you.
Yeah, dude. Well, I'll be listening and looking forward to hearing this air and coming back.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on here. Guys, make sure you check out Our Psychonaut. Subscribe to this if you care. If not, whatever. And, I'll see you guys again next Monday. Thank you.
Thanks.